3 Crime Story Secrets I Wish I Knew Sooner. The Hidden Message. Elena Carter always prided herself on her investigative skills. As a journalist with a knack for uncovering the truth, she had cracked more than a few cases. But nothing prepared her for the story that would unfold on a dreary autumn evening when she received an anonymous tip about a murder case from a decade ago. The message was brief, scrawled on a plain sheet of paper and left in the mail slot of her downtown apartment. The truth is hidden in the old diary. Find it before it's too late. Elena's mind raced. She had heard about the unsolved murder of Laura Whittaker, a young woman whose death had been ruled an accident. But the odd nature of the message made her think there was more to the story. The case had long been forgotten by the public, but not by those who wanted to keep it buried. She immediately drove to Laura Whittaker's last known residence, a dilapidated house on the outskirts of town. The house was eerily quiet, with overgrown weeds suffocating the front lawn. Elena's flashlight cast long shadows as she entered, the door creaking ominously behind her. Dust motes floated in the beam of light, dancing in the silence. Elena's heart raced as she navigated through the dark, cluttered rooms. Every creak of the floorboards seemed amplified, heightening her sense of unease. She reached the attic, a place Laura's family had mentioned in passing during her initial research. The attic door was slightly ajar, and she hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. The attic was filled with forgotten relics. Old trunks, yellowed newspapers, and a large wooden chest in the corner. Elena approached the chest, her hands trembling slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside was an assortment of items: a wedding dress, framed photographs, and a leather-bound diary. Her breath caught in her throat. The diary looked old, its cover worn and edges frayed. She opened it cautiously, the pages crackling under her fingers. As she flipped through the diary, she found entries detailing Laura's life, but there was something more. In the margins, in a hurried scrawl, were cryptic notes about someone named Mark and repeated mentions of the deal. Elena's eyes widened. This was not just a diary but a piece of a larger puzzle. She carefully noted the details, determined to find out who Mark was and what deal Laura had referred to. As she left the attic, the sense of being watched grew stronger. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her, but when she turned, the street was deserted. The shadow in the alley. The following day, Elena's investigation led her to Mark Harris, a businessman with a reputation for being ruthless. According to her sources, he had been involved in several shady deals, but there was no direct link to Laura Whittaker's case. However, Elena couldn't ignore the diary's mention of him. Mark's office was a sleek, modern building in the heart of the city. Elena arrived early, hoping to catch him before he became too busy. The receptionist's cold demeanor didn't help calm her nerves as she waited for Mark's arrival. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one stretching into an uncomfortable silence. When Mark finally walked in, he was impeccably dressed, his demeanor confident. Elena introduced herself, carefully broaching the subject of Laura Whittaker. Mark's face remained inscrutable, but Elena noticed a flicker of unease in his eyes. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Mark said smoothly, but Elena could sense the underlying tension. As their conversation ended, Mark's secretary handed Elena a folder, saying it was for your reference. Elena thanked her and left, feeling the weight of the folder in her hands. Outside, the city was bustling, but Elena felt oddly disconnected from the normalcy around her. She decided to open the folder in a quieter spot, walking down a narrow alley to avoid the crowds. The folder contained legal documents and financial records, but nothing seemed directly related to Laura. As Elena reviewed the papers, a sudden noise behind her made her jump. She turned, heart pounding, but the alley was empty. She quickened her pace, feeling a growing sense of paranoia. The feeling of being followed was almost palpable, and every shadow seemed to shift as she walked. Arriving back at her apartment, Elena locked the door behind her, her mind racing with questions. What was Mark hiding? Why was someone so intent on keeping Laura's story buried? The diary had only scratched the surface, and she knew there were deeper, darker secrets waiting to be uncovered. The final revelation. Determined to make sense of the diary's cryptic notes, Elena revisited Laura's family. They had been cooperative but seemed to avoid discussing Laura's personal life in detail. Elena suspected they knew more than they let on. Her suspicions were confirmed when Laura's mother, Margaret, revealed that Laura had been involved with a mysterious group shortly before her death. The group was said to be involved in high-stakes gambling and illegal deals. Margaret handed Elena a faded photograph of Laura with several men, Mark among them. The photograph was a crucial piece of evidence. Elena's investigation led her to a hidden casino, a place known for its seedy dealings and high-profile patrons. She managed to gain access by posing as a curious gambler, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of Mark or his associates. In a back room, Elena overheard a conversation that chilled her to the bone. Mark was speaking with several other men about a deal gone wrong, and how Laura's death was necessary to cover their tracks. Elena's heart raced as she realized the gravity of what she had uncovered. Laura had been a victim of a dangerous game. Her death a calculated move to silence her and protect the group's secrets. Elena needed to act fast. She left the casino and headed straight to the police, her evidence in hand. As she prepared to expose the truth, she felt a heavy presence behind her. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw a shadowy figure watching her from across the street. Panic surged through her, but she pushed it aside, focusing on delivering her findings. In the end, the story she had uncovered led to a major investigation. Mark Harris and his associates were arrested, and Laura Whitaker's case was finally reopened. Elena's relentless pursuit of the truth had not only solved a decade-old mystery, but had also uncovered the darker side of a seemingly untouchable elite. As she reflected on the case, Elena couldn't help but think about the secrets she had wished she had known sooner. Each revelation had brought her closer to the truth, but it had also shown her the risks involved in digging too deep. The truth had a price, and she had paid it in full. The unsettling consequences. The case was now the talk of the town. Elena Carter had made headlines for her groundbreaking work, but the victory felt hollow. The arrest of Mark Harris and his associates brought justice for Laura Whitaker, but it also came with unforeseen consequences. Elena's apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. The constant media attention had attracted a slew of curious onlookers and a deluge of threats that she could barely ignore. Her name was frequently mentioned in hostile online forums, and anonymous letters began arriving at her door. Each envelope contained unsettling messages about her interference in matters best left alone. One evening, as Elena was reviewing the latest batch of documents related to the case, she heard a soft, urgent knock on her door. She hesitated before opening it, peeking through the peephole to see a familiar face, Detective Marcus Flynn, one of the officers who had been pivotal in reopening Laura's case. "Ms. Carter," Marcus said, his expression serious. "We need to talk." Elena let him in, and Marcus quickly explained that new threats had emerged. The group behind Laura's murder had deeper connections than initially believed. Despite their arrest, there were still loyal members who would do anything to protect their interests. "We've had reports of potential retaliation," Marcus said. "And it's not just you. There's been chatter about a possible move against anyone involved in this case." Elena's heart sank. The threats had escalated from vague warnings to actual, tangible danger. Marcus handed her a file containing information about increased security measures and a temporary relocation option for her safety. As Elena reviewed the file, she felt a wave of fear and frustration. The fight for justice had led her into a dangerous game where the stakes were far higher than she had anticipated. The weight of responsibility and the fear for her safety were almost overwhelming. "I appreciate this, Detective," Elena said, her voice trembling. "But I can't just walk away from this. There's still so much to uncover." Marcus nodded, understanding her determination but also the risks involved. "I get it, but promise me you'll take precautions. We're doing everything we can, but this is bigger than we thought." The distant echoes. The days following Marcus's visit were filled with heightened tension. Elena moved through her apartment with a sense of paranoia, every sound amplified and every shadow suspect. She reluctantly agreed to increased security but refused to leave her home. One night, as she was going through the diary again, she noticed something she had missed before: a hidden pocket in the back cover. Inside was a small, folded note. Elena's hands shook as she unfolded it, revealing a single line of text: "The truth lies buried where the ashes fall." Confused and intrigued, Elena pondered the note's meaning. The reference to ashes could be symbolic or literal. Her thoughts drifted back to the casino, where she had overheard the conversation about a deal gone wrong. Was there a hidden layer to this case she had yet to uncover? Determined to find out, Elena decided to revisit the casino under the guise of a curious patron. The place was as seedy as ever, its ambience suffused with an air of danger. She slipped past the regular patrons and headed for the back rooms, where she had overheard the conversation before. The casino's staff seemed more watchful than usual, and Elena's senses were on high alert. She slipped into a dimly lit room, searching for any clues related to the cryptic note. As she scanned the area, her eyes fell on a large, ornate fireplace. The hearth had been recently cleaned, and a thin layer of ash remained. Elena's heart raced as she sifted through the ash, her fingers coming into contact with something solid. She pulled out a small metal box, its surface covered in grime. With trembling hands, she opened it to find a collection of old photographs and documents. The images were of Mark Harris and other high-profile individuals in compromising situations, including a few with Laura Whitaker. The documents revealed financial transactions and coded messages, painting a picture of a sprawling criminal network. Elena realized that Laura's murder was part of a larger scheme to control and manipulate various influential figures. Just as she was about to leave, a noise from the hallway made her freeze. Footsteps approached, and Elena knew she had to act quickly. She tucked the metal box into her bag and made her way out, her pulse pounding with every step. The final showdown. Back at her apartment, Elena reviewed the documents with mounting anxiety. The connections between the high-profile figures and the criminal network were more extensive than she had imagined. The final piece of the puzzle was falling into place, but Elena knew she had to be cautious. As she pieced together the information, she received another anonymous letter, this one more direct than the previous ones. It warned her to stop digging or face dire consequences. The letter was accompanied by a photo of her apartment building, with her front door marked in red ink. Fear gripped Elena, but she couldn't back down now. The truth was too important. She decided to take her findings to the authorities, but knew that the risk of retaliation was high. The next day, Elena met with Marcus and presented the evidence. As they reviewed the documents, Marcus's expression grew grim. "This is bigger than we thought," he said. "We need to act quickly." Marcus arranged for a secure meeting with federal investigators who specialized in organized crime. As the meeting unfolded, Elena felt a mixture of relief and dread. The gravity of the situation was evident, and the investigation was about to escalate. Late that night, Elena returned to her apartment, feeling the weight of the case bearing down on her. She was exhausted and on edge, but she couldn't afford to let her guard down. The thought of retaliation lingered in her mind. As she prepared for bed, she heard a faint scratching sound at her window. Her heart leapt into her throat. She approached the window cautiously, her breath held. The sight that met her eyes was chilling: an empty envelope with a single phrase written on it. "You should have stayed away." Elena knew that the battle was far from over. The criminal network was still out there, and the threat against her was real. But she also knew that she had come too far to turn back. The truth was out there, and she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The unexpected ally. With the case becoming increasingly dangerous, Elena realized she needed help beyond what the authorities could provide. Her next move was unconventional but necessary, reaching out to someone with insider knowledge of the criminal network. She contacted Jacob, an old informant she had worked with in the past. Jacob had a reputation for being connected to the underground world, and although he was elusive, Elena hoped he could offer valuable insights. Meeting in a dimly lit cafe, Jacob was as enigmatic as ever. He listened intently as Elena shared her findings, his eyes narrowing with recognition. "You've stumbled onto something big," he said, his voice low. "The people behind this are ruthless, and they won't hesitate to silence anyone who gets in their way." Jacob agreed to help, but on his terms. He wanted protection in exchange for his cooperation, a condition Elena reluctantly accepted. They made a plan to infiltrate the criminal network further and gather concrete evidence that would be irrefutable. Jacob's connections provided a way to monitor the activities of the criminal network from within. Elena used this information to track their movements and discovered a series of secret meetings held in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. One night, Jacob and Elena staked out the warehouse, their nerves taut with anticipation. They watched as members of the criminal network arrived, their faces hidden in the shadows. Jacob provided Elena with a hidden camera to document the meeting, hoping to catch any incriminating evidence. The night was tense, every sound amplified in the stillness. As the meeting began, Elena's camera captured crucial footage of the criminals discussing plans to eliminate anyone who threatened their operations. The conversation was detailed and revealing, providing the final pieces of the puzzle. But their operation didn't go unnoticed. As they prepared to leave, Elena noticed a figure lurking in the darkness. Her heart raced as she realized they had been spotted. They had to move quickly to avoid being caught. Jacob led the way through a series of back alleys, their escape fraught with danger. The adrenaline fueled their flight, and they managed to reach safety just as the sound of sirens pierced the night. The final betrayal. With the evidence in hand, Elena and Jacob presented their findings to the federal authorities. The information was damning, and the case took a dramatic turn. The authorities launched a large-scale operation to dismantle the criminal network. However, just when it seemed like justice was within reach, Jacob betrayed Elena. He was arrested under suspicion of being an accomplice, his motives unclear. The betrayal shook Elena to her core, and she struggled to make sense of it. As the investigation continued, Elena uncovered a hidden layer of corruption within the authorities. Some officials were secretly connected to the criminal network, undermining the effort to bring them to justice. The realization was a devastating blow, but Elena knew she had to push forward. The final confrontation came in a dramatic court case where the criminals faced charges for their crimes. Elena testified bravely, despite the threats and challenges she faced. Her courage and determination helped to expose the full extent of the criminal network's activities. In the end, the criminal network was dismantled, and many of its members were brought to justice. The case had taken a toll on Elena, but it also revealed the importance of perseverance and integrity in the face of overwhelming odds. Elena looked back on the journey with a mixture of relief and sorrow. The secrets she had uncovered were both haunting and enlightening, and the experience had changed her forever. The battle for truth had come at a great cost, but it had also affirmed her commitment to seeking justice, no matter the price. Epilogue: The Lingering Shadows. Even after the case was closed, Elena couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows of the past lingered, and she remained vigilant. The criminal network's defeat was a victory, but it was also a reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of society. Elena continued her work as a journalist, driven by a renewed sense of purpose. The secrets she had uncovered shaped her approach to her work, and she remained dedicated to uncovering the truth, no matter how perilous the path. As she moved forward, Elena knew that the fight for justice was ongoing. The shadows of the past would always be there, but she was ready to face them. The lessons she had learned and the experiences she had endured had prepared her for whatever lay ahead. In the end, Elena Carter had uncovered the truth, and while it had come with a heavy price, it had also given her the strength to continue her journey. The secrets of the past had been revealed, but the quest for justice would always be a part of her life. Echoes of the past. Months had passed since the dramatic conclusion of the criminal case. Elena Carter had returned to her work, but the echoes of the past still haunted her. Despite the closure of the case, she felt a lingering unease, as if something important had been left unresolved. One evening, while sifting through old files and news clippings, Elena received an unexpected package. It was a plain brown envelope with no return address. Inside was a single yellowed newspaper article from a decade ago, reporting on a series of unsolved burglaries. The article was marked with a handwritten note, "Not everything is as it seems." Confused and intrigued, Elena examined the article closely. The burglaries were minor compared to the murder case she had worked on, but the note suggested a connection. The cases had been dismissed as unrelated, but the coincidence of receiving this article now made Elena suspect otherwise. Determined to uncover any hidden connections, Elena began investigating the burglaries. She visited the locations listed in the article and interviewed the victims, many of whom had since moved away or forgotten the incidents. The trail seemed cold, but Elena's instincts told her there was more to find. As she delved deeper, she discovered that several of the burglary victims had been involved in similar high-stakes financial dealings as Laura Whitaker and Mark Harris. The link was tenuous but intriguing. Elena began to piece together a pattern that suggested these burglaries were more than random acts of theft, they were part of a larger scheme. Her investigation led her to a man named Victor Mallory, a private investigator who had worked on some of the burglary cases. Victor was reluctant to talk but eventually agreed to meet with Elena. In a dimly lit cafe, he shared his own findings, revealing that the burglaries had been orchestrated by a shadowy figure known only as the broker. The broker was rumored to be an enigmatic figure who controlled various criminal enterprises from behind the scenes. Victor had been tracking him for years but had never been able to bring him to justice. The more Elena learned about the broker, the more she realized that this figure might be the key to understanding the full extent of the criminal network she had uncovered. The broker's web. Armed with Victor's information, Elena and he began to track down leads on the broker. Their search took them through a labyrinth of financial records, coded messages, and hidden meetings. The broker's influence was pervasive, reaching into legitimate businesses and corrupting those in power. Elena's research revealed that the broker had a history of manipulating events to his advantage, using intermediaries and deceit to stay hidden. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that the broker was the mastermind behind the criminal network, orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. One night, as Elena reviewed documents at her apartment, she heard a faint noise outside her door. She peered through the peephole but saw nothing unusual. Cautiously, she opened the door to find another envelope, this one addressed to her personally. Inside was a cryptic message. "You're getting closer but you don't know the whole story." The message confirmed her fears. The broker was aware of her investigation and was actively monitoring her. Elena knew she was in danger, but the urgency of her mission drove her to push forward. She and Victor planned a final, daring move to expose the broker's identity and dismantle his operations. The final confrontation. Elena and Victor traced the broker to a high-end estate on the outskirts of town. The estate was heavily guarded and surrounded by a high fence, making infiltration difficult. However, they had managed to obtain a list of guests attending a secretive event at the estate. Disguised as caterers, Elena and Victor gained access to the event. The opulence of the surroundings contrasted sharply with the grim purpose of their mission. The guests were a mix of influential figures and shady characters, their conversations revealing the extent of the broker's influence. As Elena and Victor moved through the crowd, they spotted a man in a tailored suit who seemed to be the center of attention. His demeanor and the way people reacted to him suggested he was the broker. Elena took note of his features and tried to gather evidence without drawing attention. The situation took a dangerous turn when one of the guards became suspicious of their behavior. Elena and Victor had to act quickly, slipping away into the shadows as the guards closed in. They managed to escape the estate and return to safety, but the close call left them shaken. The next day, Elena presented their evidence to the authorities, including photographs and testimonies about the broker's involvement. The evidence was compelling, but the broker had vanished before he could be arrested. The authorities launched a manhunt, but he remained elusive. The aftermath. The hunt for the broker continued, but the trail had gone cold. Elena's investigation had exposed the depth of corruption and criminal activity, but it had also left her with a sense of unfinished business. The broker's identity remained a mystery, and the impact of his actions was still being felt. Despite the unresolved elements of the case, Elena found solace in the progress made. The dismantling of the criminal network had brought justice to many victims, and the authorities were better equipped to tackle future cases. Elena continued her work, driven by the knowledge that her efforts had made a difference. As she reflected on the journey, Elena realized that the pursuit of truth was an ongoing process. The shadows of the past would always be there, but she had gained invaluable experience and insight. The case had tested her resolve and courage, and she emerged from it stronger and more determined. Elena's story was one of perseverance in the face of danger, a testament to the power of seeking justice even when the path was fraught with challenges. The secrets she had uncovered had changed her life, but they had also reaffirmed her commitment to uncovering the truth, no matter the obstacles. The final words of the cryptic message "You're getting closer, but you don't know the whole story" lingered in her mind, a reminder that the fight for justice was never truly over. Elena Carter was ready for whatever came next, prepared to face the unknown with the same courage and determination that had guided her throughout her journey.